Information, education, motivation. Real life, real topics. Welcome to Cayman Conversations, now streaming on Caymanian Times Facebook and YouTube channels, and also live on Bobo FM 89.1. Today we welcome Daniel Coleman, Onisha Richards, and Mr. John Tibbetts. We will be discussing hurricane preparedness and forecasts, communication during hurricanes, and post-hurricane survival. Daniel Coleman is Director of Hazard Management, Cayman Islands, and is responsible for preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery activities in relation to both natural and man-induced disaster management in the Cayman Islands. Onisha Richards is the Director of Communications for the Cayman Islands government and Chair of the Joint Communications Emergency Support Team in the National Emergency Operations Center. Last but not least, Mr. John Tibbetts. He is the Director General of the Cayman Islands National Weather Service and weather forecasting in the Cayman Islands. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Cayman Conversations. How are you doing today?
Good.
Really good, thank you. How you doing, Ralph?
I'm doing great. We're just waiting for Mr. John. I'm sure he'll be here in a few minutes. Are you enjoying the weather?
Nice and moody day.
We love it. It's so as long as you have your rain mac and your umbrella, you're fine. But it's it's nice, moody, very moody day.
Great. Okay. Well, Daniel, can you tell us what you do at Hazard Management?
Okay, so hazard management for hello for all the listeners today. So hazard management, we're responsible for coordination of any national emergency. So obviously, hurricane season is our biggest threat in the Cayman Islands. However, we also work with things from migration to oil spills to fire to earthquakes, tsunamis, anything that could become an emergency of a big proportion. Obviously, a lot of the agencies will focus, if it's a road traffic accident, for example, it may only be the police service or it may be the fire. But a lot of the times, because of our resources on the island, it'll become multi-agency, and that's where we get involved because we do a lot of coordination of that.
Yes. And I remember having many meetings during the pandemic.
Pandemic meetings, and pandemic,
yes. Yes. Okay. Onisha, can you just give us an idea of what you do?
Sure. So I have the pleasure of being responsible for communications for the government. We sit in the cabinet office. So we're a Department of Communications. A lot of people are familiar with GIS. In 2021, the government made a decision to coordinate all communications. So we have the Strategic Communications Unit, what was known as GIS, and then internal communications all sit in what is now Department of Communications. So I have the pleasure of heading up that team and function. I think particularly for your listeners today is our function when it comes to crises. So what we're responsible for, of course, in those times is to ensure individuals are aware of what's happening, giving them safety information that can keep themselves and their families safe, and ensuring that's done on an ongoing and timely basis. So we head up the Joint Communication Services for the government, and that is an activated agency once there is a crisis declared. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we do. It's really hard to kind of put it into a couple of words because depending on the hazard,
it's a very important job.
Yeah, depending on the hazard, is how we act. But we have a really strong team. And I should note that Joint Communication Services is not just a Department of Comms. Once we activate in that function, all communicators across the public sector become a part of the structure to help us make sure all those messages are going out accurately and timely.
Okay, that's good.
I think just to add to that, I mean, Anisha does it, again, it's a tremendous, communication is such an important aspect when it comes to any kind of large-scale emergency. So sometimes obviously hazard management morphs into what we call the National Emergency Operations Center, and we coordinate that, but that's, again, multi-agency. But sometimes we'll be fully activated with all the 19 emergency support teams.
Yeah.
A lot of the times it'll be much smaller. It'll be ourselves and a few other agencies, a few under teams under the National Emergency Operations Centre, communications is always going to be one of those, because communications in any emergency is absolutely critical. If the gap's not being filled by government and the official sources, obviously there's a big reach for people to fill the gap. And I think communications is absolutely critical in any emergency. Consistent messaging across the entire government, and again shared with the wider public.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Thanks.
And we could spend a little more time on communication while John gets ready to talk about the actual weather itself and the preparation for the hurricane season and what we should do. But one of the reasons that I'm here in media is because I'm really concerned about the level and the function of media in getting the message out. Because
Hmm.
I understand, and I'm sure you agree, that it is important to get the right information
Yes.
all the time to the right people. And so,
Mm.
Alicia, just speak to that, please, how important it is that the information is accurately given and at the right time.
That is critical, because having the right information at the right time, we know, saves lives, right? So it's incredibly important. And it's incredibly important that people in the media, like yourselves, are able to support us in ensuring that things are accurate. I think a lot of the struggle that the public has, and it's normal for any public, is that they want things, immediately or almost before it was thought of in some cases. But we're very, very focused on ensuring that it's accurate, because accurate information is what's going to be important. So I think, when we talk about communications, particularly as they go with crises, we're trying to be as timely as possible. And we're definitely going to be accurate. That's our goal. One of the things that we know has been more beneficial for us, and we've changed over the past kind of 2 years, is to also have a frequency. Danny kind of mentioned that rhythm. And I think that the community can rely on the fact that we let them know that every 6 hours we're going to say something, even if there's nothing to say, just so they also get used to the rhythm of when will you get information, at least on an ongoing basis. We work
Yes.
closely with Radio Cayman as well to make sure that avenue, we're putting out the same type of message. So there's consistency as well. The last thing we want for the community is that they're hearing different things in different places. So one of the strong points that we have from a JCS perspective is to ensure that all government is sending out the same information, and we're trusting our media partners to be in that with us, so that we're sending out the same accurate information together.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Mr. John Tibbetts. John, welcome back. Uh, we were just asking our guests to just give a little description of the role and your responsibilities. Can you help us here?
Well, as head of the Cayman Islands National Weather Service, I am the lead voice, as it were, for the Meteorological Authority for the Cayman Islands. So a big part of my role is involved in monitoring the Atlantic Ocean, and especially the Caribbean Sea force systems that may present some inclement weather that may be dangerous to the general public. And we not only pass that information on to the media sources, but we also pass those on to HMCI and the communication team on some of the larger level systems. Certainly, we wouldn't necessarily pass on, like, let's say you got a cold front come in, unless the cold front is a major one that is going to produce waves that are going to compromise the road traffic or the coastal road on Saginaw Beach. And part of that job also involves looking at the making sure that we get the impacts down correct, and that we pass that information on as well.
Okay, thank you, John. We were just talking about communication and how important it is, and as just while we're waiting, and Amisha gave her a little contribution. Can you just uh, let us know how you feel about communication and the importance to get the right information at the right time?
Um, well, communication is absolutely critical, and I think when you're looking at the government agencies now, the government agencies are now having a communications officer as part of the team. Okay, so when you're composing a ministry, you must have a communications officer, so that the messages that are coming out from the ministry, coming out from the departments in that ministry, are all vetted and presented in the correct manner. Now, year in and year out, we continue to fight with other media, other meteorological experts that post things on YouTube and Facebook and what have you, and they have a tendency to excite the public when there really isn't no need for excitement. Their forecasters have a tendency to forecast whatever the weather model says, they take it as gospel. And yet, in my experience, and if you ask any of the weather forecasters inside there, they will tell you that the weather models are often wrong. There are numerous times when they have forecasted massive hurricanes, massive rain events to come across the Cayman Islands, and nothing happens. Not only does nothing happen, but nothing even starts up. You know, from the Weather Service's point of view, as the director of the Weather Service, the weather model can tell me there's a strong low coming through, but I got to see that low form first, okay? Because I know the errors in the models, okay? And it isn't going to make good sense for us to be constantly crying wolf when there's no wolf, okay? And these other meteorologists who are posting things on YouTube, please understand something. They really have no accountability when you sit down and think about it, because no matter how many times they're wrong, the Cayman general public are not going to go and says they're wrong. They'll say they're wrong when the National Weather Service says they're wrong, because it is my job for the Cayman Islands people. It's my job for the Cayman Islands government. That is my role. All right. They are doing this on a private venture on the side, and there are no penalties for them being wrong.
Okay.
Okay. There are potential penalties for us in terms of our public not necessarily listening to us. Yeah. All right. And not reacting to warnings when we issue them. So that's the situation that we're in.
Okay. Danny, can you give us your input on this, please?
I think John's got a great point. And at the end of the day, we can't be crying wolf all the time. We have to have reasonable expectation that we're going to get impacted. But of course, with climate change and other things, you know, things change very, very quickly. It's a very, very dynamic playing field. When we're talking about storms in particular here, it's a very dynamic playing field. So that information getting out in a timely manner, verified, and again, we are following it and consistently updating it, is absolutely critical. I think John and I do both have the same pet peeve when it comes to these models that come and stress everyone out and actually have no factual basis. Because at the end of the day, you know, I think everyone's got enough stress in their lives these days. We certainly don't want to add to that. And I think one of the biggest things is to constantly put that stress out there. And of course, when you do have the big storms that, you know, are actually happening, you know, you become so exhausted from the whole thing. You're not actually going to respond as you should do. So we are very, very careful when we do any kind of, you know, activation of sorts through the forecasting and again through the National Emergency Operations Centre, to know that there really is a risk. I say that, but I also say, you know, we have over the last few years erred on the side of caution. So whereas sometimes in the past we may not have activated because it's a tropical storm, or we may not have activated because, you know, it wasn't anything of significant threat. We've actually changed that a bit over the last few years. And I think maybe COVID's made us a bit more sensitive to things, but also Tropical Storm Grace. I mean, again, that was much more impact than I think a lot of people expected, including ourselves, I think. So I think we've always, as the NEAC, the National Emergency Operations Centre, we tend to plan ahead, make sure we're ready to go and activate. But again, if things calm down during the night or things change dramatically, we will deactivate very quickly. We'd rather go full out and then pare back. And at the very least, it's a great exercise, training exercise for all of us working together, getting the best a possible scenario. I mean, for COVID is a great example. I mean, obviously it was a pandemic as opposed to a storm, but we were activated for 104 days. So we've changed a lot over the last couple of years as to how we work together and how we are streamlined and how we're making sure we're getting the best out of our multi-agency response. We've done a lot more training even this year with all our key players in the National Emergency Operations Centre. So I think there's that I wouldn't ever call anything's over preparing. I think it's being very ready to go no matter what the emergency is. But again, paring back and being constantly reassessing that situation. And I think that, again, for the public, we strongly encourage the public to do the same thing. If there is a storm coming, for example, and it looks only to be a tropical storm, well, just be aware that that can change very dramatically, very, very quickly. And I think, again, with climate change, we're seeing this rapid intensification much more so than we have done in the past.
Okay, thank you. I mean, we're going to get back into those details in a bit, but let's talk about the weather. We are now into June, in that time of year when we all prepare for the worst.
No, well, let me correct you for that. We prepared that the whole year.
Yes. Always prepared.
Always prepared, right. Well, Mr. John, we're going to call you back on front stage again, just to let us know what are we expecting or what are the plans for this year, or what are the forecasts for this year?
Okay, so when the experts are out there looking to produce a prediction for the season, they start to look at the various atmospheric factors that determine hurricanes and the level of the hurricanes for the season. So first on the agenda is usually the El Nino La Nina cycle. Okay. So all of the predictions up until this point have said, hey, listen, we're forecasting that an El Nino will will develop this year. Okay. This morning I got a message from NOAA. NOAA is now officially advising us that that is no longer a forecast. That is now a fact. The El Nino is here. Okay. Now, what is El Nino and what does it do? All right. The El Nino is basically a warming of the eastern Pacific Ocean. Okay. And the impact that it has on the Atlantic basin is generally, it has a tendency to cap the development of the hurricane season. Okay. It usually produces wind shear. Okay. And the wind shear has a tendency to tear apart thunderstorms, which are the lifeblood of hurricanes. Okay. So congratulations. I gave you the good news part of this. There's a little bit of bad news on it. And that is there's a competing situation, and that is that the sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic Ocean are above normal. Okay, so we got one thing fighting against an active season, and something else fighting for an active season. All right, and we're going to kind of have to see how this plays out. In the sense that we're going to need to see where exactly and how extensive the wind shear patterns are with regards to the El Nino pattern. And we're going to see how that impacts the various systems as they try to form up. In terms of the prediction, we look at two different sources. We look at Colorado State, and we look at NOAA. Okay, NOAA says we're going to have an average season. Colorado State says we're going to have an average season. Now, I will tell you that the April forecast that came out from Colorado actually had the named storms, the hurricanes, and the major hurricanes all below the average numbers. Their June prediction brings them up a little bit. So the prediction from Colorado State, June forecast, named storms 15. Hurricanes, 7. Major hurricanes, 3. Now, if I'm looking at the long-term averages, that 15 is just over the average. The average is 14.4. The average of major hurricanes is 7.2. So the prediction on the number of hurricanes is actually a smidget below. And then the major hurricanes, the long-term average is 3.2. Prediction at 3. So we kind of have almost a pure definition of what an average season was. There's very little difference between what the long-term averages is and what is being predicted. Okay. Now, note, obviously, season gets very interesting. The first tropical system that was regarded by the National Hurricane Center for this season actually happened in January. Okay. And then we have Arlene developing in the Gulf of Mexico and doing all kind of scary things and what have you. But at the end of the day, it dissipated and did not cause us any trouble. So we will now continue on and wait for the next system to form.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. John. Onisha, communication. Is this information being passed out to the community regarding the preparations, the forecasts, and what is your feedback from the community? Are they accepting it? Are they getting enough information? In your experience, is the information that is being put out reaching the audiences that they should reach? And what are their feedback?
Yeah, so, the team has been doing a good job at the start of the season talking about the forecast, what's expected. I kind of wanted to go back a little bit to what John was talking about too, in terms of, a lot of, I like to call them amateur. I'm sure there's a specific title for them, John, in terms of people on YouTube giving out weather. One of the things that we've been kind of really tackling and wanting to share with the community and continue to share with the community is official weather sources for the Cayman Islands. Because it's extremely important that as you're talking about getting ready for the season, as something approaches, that, we all know that the population's curious. We get information from a lot of different places. We're not saying that you won't do that or shouldn't do that, but that you trust the information that's coming from official sources. So I just kind of wanted to go back to that. We know people are in those areas and they're listening. We're actually going to be pushing out content throughout the rest of the season that's specifically about getting ready. Some of the messages that I think most people tend to not think about is that, the makeup of our population. So those of us who've been through this a couple of times, we feel quite comfortable to know what we need to do. But there are many, many people on island who call this home, who've never been through a very strong storm or don't know how to prepare. So we spend a lot of time explaining the things that you should have in your kit. We have robust websites. There's lots of social media. There'll be a number of other pieces that are printed that are sent out throughout the season. We also work with various departments to get that information to individuals who may be vulnerable or get information slightly more traditional. So there's a multifaceted way that we continue to tell the public how to be prepared. One of the simple messages that we'll be pushing very strong this year is have a radio. We know it's not something that people tend to have anymore. We do everything on our phones or on our computer, but in the midst of a storm, you want to save batteries and you still need to get that information. And we know radio works. So there's some, we have key messages, what to have in your hurricane kit, how to stay prepared. But then we're particularly focused on those individuals who may not understand what preparation means just because they haven't experienced it before. So you'll see us spending a lot of time in areas where we feel new residents may actually be getting information as well.
Okay, very good.
And then I know Danny would be remiss if I didn't mention NEANS. We continue to tell individuals do sign up for the emergency alert system. It's a way to get information. So during, we would use that system, not necessarily, we would not use it for preparation, but we definitely use it for the alert phases. So it's something that you should have. And the site for all of this information will be Cayman Prepared. So we continue to support our friends in hazard management. That's the main website for information about preparing for hazards in the Cayman Islands. In the event of a threat, you will see that site change very quickly to giving you all information you need, all in the same space, live updates, as well as contact information. And the public is familiar with that website, so we feel strongly like that's the right avenue for people to continue to look at. It's caymanprepared.ky.
Yes. Before I go to Danny, as a owner of a media house, I
Yes.
just want to know that we have a responsibility to make sure that we get the right information at the right time. Sometimes we get tempted to get clickbait, so we get activity on our
Yeah.
websites, and I understand the business model for that as well. But we have to take responsibility. We have to act responsible, especially in these disasters,
Yeah.
because we can make it worse by putting the wrong information out at the wrong time. And so,
One of
as a
the
media owner, I'm
Yeah.
going to take responsibility and I'm going to set the example and say, guys, we need to do the right thing. We need to know the source and stick with the source
Yes.
and depend on the source and stop making up our own stories to try and get clicks, and which happens. And I'm honest with it. So, so as media, we're going to take our responsibility seriously.
And to that point, our team is always available to the media. And you guys know that we continue to ensure you have
Yes.
access directly to us. So, even if it's a matter of you're feeling very pressured about information, you can come directly to us so we can give you as much as possible. No, of course, we're going to be accurate, but we're here for the media as well. Like, I think everybody needs to realize that it's not a closed off type of situation. We work in partnership with you.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. Danny, hazard management. How do you manage hazards, especially in hurricane season? Yes, we're thinking about hurricanes right now, but you might have an earthquake. These things happen. You might have another
Yeah.
disaster. How do you cope? Do you have an assistant that will take over for the hurricane season, or you're still in charge? You still have the groups coming together. How do you manage this?
Okay, so we have a saying here at Hazard Management that teamwork makes the dream work, right? So I think, it's a massive collaboration. Yes, Hazard Management are the coordinating body of the structure, and we do this day in, day out, no matter what it is. And I know back in the day, people used to say to me, what do you do for the other 6 months of the year when you haven't got hurricanes? And I'm like, we are multi-hazard. So any hazard that happens in Cayman, we are pretty much involved. Even the other day with the explosion, there's so many different aspects of it. Migration, Cuban migration, we've been involved heavily with that over the last year and a half or so. So there's lots of things that go on behind the scenes that no one sees, be it exercises, trainings, shelters. We have 19 shelters across the 3 islands, and hazard management is responsible for all those shelters. Relief supplies. We have containers full of relief supplies. Even the emergency field hospital from COVID belongs to NEAC. Oh, beautiful list. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ralph. So there's a lot that goes on behind managing hazards. But again, going back to it, it is about teamwork. We have to work together. We have to make sure we work well with our colleagues, because there's one thing, when we can, in normal days, blue skies like today, or grayish skies today, you can get on with your job. But unless we have those great relationships, it really does go a bit south during an emergency, because you're exhausted. You may not have slept for a number of hours. You're just on the go. So I think those kind of relationships, and I know, Anisha and John, we're all joined at the hip during any emergency, and we do have a great relationship. So I think it's those relationships across the whole national emergency structure. And it's not just the Emergency Operations Centre. We have the executive, which is the cabinet and the Commissioner of Police, and obviously is chaired by the Premier and the Governor. We have the policy group, which is deputies and so forth, chief officers, and chaired by the Deputy Governor. And then, of course, we have the council. So there's 4 different groups there that we have to help coordination of through hazard management. But those relationships are really very solid. And we're also very keen to make sure that mental health is very much part of that. So mental health has been incorporated into the structure as of about 3 years ago. Ironically, just before COVID, we worked very, very closely with Dipna Carter, who's HSA psychiatric nurse, and she's been a massive valuable asset, because not only does she make decisions with the mental health hat on, but also she kind of gives us a nod when we're not making much sense. If we need that support ourselves, because I think none of us are superheroes, and we all need that support. And I think it's that
Yes.
that those kind of friendships or relationships that can say, okay, I think it's time you took a break and you need to go because you need time out for, even if it's 10 minutes, just to breathe and just have a
Yes.
bit of mental health check-in with yourself.
Yes.
But just go back to what Anisha was talking about in regards to communications. I mean, there's so much that goes on at this time of year, but also throughout the year. But we're in schools the whole time doing school drills. In March, we did a significant number of emergency drills in schools for earthquakes and tsunamis. I know for this month we've been in the DIY shops across the island every weekend to talk about people's elevation and where they'd shelter, and obviously downloading the NEEDS app. So a lot of that community outreach. In service clubs, we do a lot of work in, go to Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions, and so forth, making sure that everyone there's, ready to go and prepared for whatever it is. And again, this next couple of weeks, we've been doing, and the last couple of weeks, a lot of work with elderly people. So you're talking about the more vulnerable people, obviously, elderly people, caretakers of the elderly. So there's about 8 to 10 presentations with the elderly. One's happening tonight, actually. And that's very much in collaboration with the Department of Children and Family Services. So there's a lot going on. But talking about the targeting and the messaging, I mean, we have to make sure the stuff, when we talk about hurricane season, it's not boring. The last thing we want is the same old messaging every year that everyone just rolls their eyes and go, oh God, not you guys again, please, give us a break. So we're trying to make our messaging, again, with the help of the whole comms team, very dynamic and very sort of like fresh and funky. And every year it's got, how do we palette this? How's it stomachable again this year? Slightly different changes on the wording. And one of the great things, again, work that we did was led by the comms team, was a survey this year about hurricane messaging. And again, a lot of that's been targeting. What we're doing now is as a result of the feedback we got there. So we are always listening to the public as to how they're hearing it and if they're listening to it. And again, how we can make our services better. We always want that feedback.
Okay, thank you. Very well. Before I go to Mr. John for this next question, how do the superheroes deal with their family lives in a crisis?
I won't lie to you.
Danny, you go first.
I won't lie to you. Well, I will say, when we had the earthquake in 2020, my stepdaughter called me up and she's like, have you forgotten about me? Because it was after hours. I think it was at 4 o'clock. And I'm like, now we have a no lying policy in our house. So I'm like, well, I have to be frank. I said, my headspace is in my job. And I don't want to, I relied on her teachers to make sure that she was safe. Yes. But it's often a really difficult balance. And unfortunately, often the family have to take the back seat when it comes to emergencies. But the more prepared they are and ready to go, and we make sure that's happening throughout the whole year, and that they're self-sufficient and they get on with it, the better. And I think it's just so important. But unfortunately, the job is a job, and this is kind of what we signed up for when we signed up for it.
Anisha,
it takes a village. That's all I say. Our son, the dog, is very used to their family members just showing up and say, "Hey, you're coming with us." In our household, we have 2 superheroes, so the dog and the son's usually being taken care of by someone else. So I'd say it's definitely the village. But to Danny's point, it's what we sign up for. It is exciting. It makes the job rewarding as well. So it's not something that, I'm whining about. But it takes a village. And I will always say that people need to have strong support in whatever role they're in. But definitely in this one, you need that.
Thank you. Mr. John? How do you manage? You're in there 24/7, sometimes 36 hours. How do you manage your family life?
Well, I have 2 families. I have my blood family. I got my national weather service family, and they got my back. I really haven't produced a weather forecast for the Cayman Islands since about 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a fantastic team behind me. It's headed up by my chief meteorologist, Mr. Kerry Powery. And if there's somebody that wears a Superman cape, it is Mr. Powery. He has all of my respect in the world. And yet he's not the only one. Regretfully this year, as of the end of June, change will be coming to the National Weather Service in that the individual that I have worked with the longest in my career will be retiring, and that's Mr. Avalon Porter. So we will be wishing him. I don't think he's going to quite leave. He's going to probably come back or something like that. But it's a sign of the changing times. In fact, one of the mistakes I made this year is I didn't go out to A.L. Thompson's to buy myself some rope to tie myself down for this year. Because, there's a whole lot going on in the Weather Service. And, getting the family dealt with is very important. I remember when Hurricane Ivan came, I was blessed in the sense that the NEOC was really the fire department. And the fire department is where my older brother worked. Yes. And my wife and my kids had gone up to Bordentown to ride out the hurricane. And they had an evacuation, and guess what? They all ended up down there at the Georgetown Fire Station with me. And yes, that was certainly a load off my shoulder that my family could be there with me. And I mean, regardless of during the storm, I still don't have time to spend with them. But, it is what it is. So
yes.
I have to admit, during any hurricane, John, I think I become your work wife. And I know I'm much bossier to John than our Kathy is. So I think he's always happy at the all clear. Not so much the all clear, but the fact that I'm no longer bossing him around.
Well, I've heard the passion and the commitment. I want to thank you all for what you do and the sacrifices that you've made. And I think the country is a better place with individuals such as yourself. Mr. John, next question. Yeah. I have a concern about complacency. We get all ready for a hurricane or storm. It doesn't happen. The next time around, people become complacent. Is that something that you're concerned about as well?
Always. Amazingly enough, I started my career in the mid-1980s. And the top thing on our plate at that time was the fact that we had not been hit by a major storm for a while. And so we were very concerned about complacency, about people not taking things, taking the threat very seriously. And I dare say, since we've become a National Weather Service and hazards management is formed and what have you, I've seen some storms that I've gone through, and Foster's has basically had to, I don't want to say kick them out the door, okay? But they have people, residents of the country, going into Foster's when tropical storm force or winds are hitting, okay? And if you want to define complacency, that's how you define it. Because the reality of the situation is that you don't know if those heavy thunder showers might hit, and you might not be able to drive safely back to your home. You might be just taking into consideration just the storm force winds. What about places like South Sound, where the sea came across the road in a number of our recent storms? Okay. Did your plan to get back home, might it have gone through that region? Okay. The gully in Savannah. Okay. We had an incident. It's with Hurricane Mitch, and Hurricane Mitch didn't come here, but it was 200 miles away and cost us about $14 million worth of damage. But one of the things that was very, very, very significant, and people need to listen to this very carefully, and that is Hurricane Mitch activated the gully. Okay. And it's more than just the road flooding. It's the water flowing like a river. Okay. And there was an incident that I remembered when Hurricane Mitch was threatening the area. And that was, there was a very small car carrying a family crossed by Domino's Pizza where the gully comes out. And the force of the moving water was pushing the car into the trench on the side of the road, and the police and the fire department had to come there and rescue them. Okay, these things you need to take into consideration. You cannot wait until the last minute. It is not advisable. Okay, during the storm, one of the things I preached in terms of some of our meetings is, if you're deciding to go in a shelter, you make sure that you're in that shelter before those tropical storm force winds hit. All right. When Ivan was here, we had people crying out to the NEOC, "Come and save us!" And the emergency people at the fire department, if they now go out to save you, they endanger their lives.
Yeah.
Okay, you need to be in shelters. Those decisions need to be made before the storm, not when the storm is hitting. All right, and of course, because we have things like rapid development, you should always be thinking this is a major storm. Always. I don't want to say I don't care what the National Weather Service says, because I'm preaching to you to listen to me. But if we say it's a tropical wave, a tropical depression, or a tropical storm, you might go like, "Oh, that's weak." Well, what did Grace teach us? Grace taught us that what? Don't take a tropical storm for granted. Okay? So we need to respect nature, and we need to act soon, and we need to not be complacent that we are going to cause other people to endanger their lives to correct your mistake.
Yeah. And your points are very, very well taken, and I encourage everyone to take those warnings very seriously, because we never know. Well, folks, it's been a real pleasure for me to be here. I wish I could be here for another 45 minutes, but maybe we can have a part two to talk about a lot more of these topics. I think is very important. So if you can give me your final words, each of you, and what your wishes for this hurricane season will be. Starting with you, Anisha.
Thanks for having us, Ralph. This is a great conversation. It's always good to talk about these topics, and with my friends from Hazard Management and John over at National Weather Service. So thank you for the opportunity. From our side of communications, I really want to urge people to tune into official sources, absolutely, and continue to prepare for the season. There's lots of messaging, and people do add information in the absence of information. So being able to go back to check to where the official news is most important. So I just want to leave that as a tidbit, that always go to, whether it's caymanprepared.ky. We'll also have messages on gov.ky. Radio Cayman is our official partner when it comes to hurricane season. And we encourage our media partners to stay connected to us so we can ensure we're sharing accurate and timely information. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're most welcome. Danny.
I agree. I mean, again, things being said today, making sure you know what your hazard at your home is. So your elevation of your home, if you're on the coast, know what your risks are, because again, you can't wait to the last minute to be running to a shelter. As John says, you have to be there. It's first come, first serve. So at the end of the day, that we only have 8% of shelter capacity in Grand Cayman. We're working with a lot of the private companies, but still at this point, public shelters only house 8%. So you need to be there early. You need to be bunkered down. You need to have your supplies. You need to know what to take to a shelter, and also have your hurricane supplies at home. There's nothing worse than scrambling at the supermarket, 24 hours beforehand, because you just don't need that stress. Make sure the kids are involved in the plan. Make sure that the animals are involved in the plan. Make sure you're looking out for your neighbors and the vulnerable people around you. It's just so critical. People around you may need more help than you do. So make sure you're accounting that into your time management before a storm. As Anisha says, there's some great resources on our website, caymanprepared.ky. We also have Facebook and social media, Twitter and Instagram. So there's a lot of information coming out there, but we're really pleading with the public, just be ready for the season. And don't take anything for granted. Don't be complacent. And just, again, we're here to help. So anything you want from hazard management, planning wise, we're very much here to help, and go to any service clubs or schools or whatever it is. Just call us up and invite us in, and we can tailor it to your own specific needs. But thank you, Ralph, and thank you all your listeners.
Thank you very much. Mr. John, in the final words.
Well, I'd like to. There are two things that I want to just touch on real quick. Number one, let's big up our superwoman there, Danny Coleman,
Yes.
and HMCI, and the
Yes.
fantastic job that they've done over there, and the level of enthusiasm that they've got for their work.
Yeah.
Cayman has a very solid hurricane plan. Okay, and you've got a very dedicated set of disaster managers that really have invested a lot in there. Um, that plan takes into consideration just about every aspect of life.
Mhm.
I mean, from animals to medicine to all kind of things. So the plan is there to help everybody, and just don't be a problem to the plan. Okay, things like going in shelters early, protecting your house, and taking care of things. You know, these are on you, but the disaster managers have done their job. Okay, whether it's issuing warnings or all of the public awareness and everything else that we do. Okay, the second part is that I know we're talking about an average season, and over the last number of years, we've been having some that have been blowing the season totals away. We've been setting numerous records from way back in 2005 and what have you. Um, Always remember, it only takes one. Okay, don't look at the forecast and go, well, we're going to have an average season, or we're going to have below an average season. We got El Nino, so we're safe. No, no, only takes one. The season might give you one Category 5 hurricane, and then the Hurricane Center will tell me, hey, John, you had an average season. But that Category 5 hurricane came to the Cayman Islands. God forbid.
Mhm.
And from our point of view, we would never consider that an average season.
Uh, Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate you. Well, folks, I really appreciate all of you coming on today and highlighting these important topics and educating me. I've learned so much. I'm going to go back to my study book and get ready for the hurricane season. I hope to have you back again sometime, maybe in about a month or two, when we see some activity, or maybe not, but it's always about being prepared. Thank you very much. I want to wish you a very good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, all. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, listeners.
You're welcome. Well, thank you very much for joining me for that interesting interview with Danny Coleman, Onisha Richards, and Mr. Tibbetts. Coming up next, we're going to play the recording from the governor for her hurricane season message, followed by another wonderful interview with UCCI. Good evening and have a great weekend.
Hello, everyone. The start of the 2023 hurricane season is fast approaching, so I wanted to add my voice to the many others you'll be hearing, reminding us of the importance of preparing well for this unpredictable time of year. The long-term weather forecast suggests that this will be a near-average season, and that means that a tropical storm or hurricane could affect Cayman and disrupt our normal way of life. Reflecting on 2022 and seeing just how close devastating Hurricane Ian came to our shores, it's easy to see why this is really important. To help us prepare, we all need to understand the risks associated with hurricanes. There can be strong winds and heavy rain, but also high crashing waves and the potential for storm surge. Storm surge is a rise in the level of the sea which happens as storm winds push water forward. It can cause flooding, especially in low-lying areas. Once we understand just how much damage hurricanes can do, we can make a better plan to protect ourselves and our families. As a minimum, it's important for us all to think about which room in our house is the safest place during a storm. And if we are concerned that no place is safe, we need to know which shelter we would use. We need to stock up on non-perishable food and fresh water, enough for about a week for every family member. And I'm trying to remember Benji, my dog, so please don't forget your pets as well. Check on your torches and make sure that you have a good supply of batteries. And most importantly, we must all listen to the advice of the experts in hazard management Cayman Islands. This is my first hurricane season, so I'm doing all I can to prepare for every eventuality. For more information, please go to the excellent website Cayman Prepared, which you can see on this screen. Let's all stay safe. Thank you.
University College of the Cayman Islands and see how they are involved. Good afternoon, gentlemen, and welcome to Cayman Conversations.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Okay. It's been a pleasure to have you here again, and it's good to see you. And as always, in this special UCCI segment, we want to put the focus back today on RISMBID. And Matthew, can you tell me something about yourself and what's your role and RISMBID itself?
Okay, well, my name is Matthew McGill. I have a background in urban planning, specifically land use planning. My role here on the RISMBID project is as an administrative assistant. I'm here to more or less oversee the deliverables of the project, ensuring that we report back to the EU in a timely manner and to monitor the different deliverables that the project has as well. So as one of my key roles, and of course, to monitor the various activities of the project. As you are aware, there are many different moving arms of the project, from training to reporting in terms of a needs assessment survey, which I guess we'll touch on later on. But those are the main things that I kind of oversee at this moment.
Okay. Mr. Cleveland, I know you've been here, but just for those who joined us today and they don't remember, just tell us about your role.
Absolutely. Good morning, Ralph, and good morning to your listening audience. As Ralph mentioned, my name is Cleveland Julian. I am the project manager for the RISMBID 2 project. I formerly served as the project officer for the RISMBID 1 project, which Matthew now manages under the auspices of the Dean, Mr. Paul Parkerin. And so I'm purely here today in a supportive role to really shine the torch on what Matthew and his team is doing with RISMBID 1.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Recently, you've been involved in a labor market assessment. Could you give me some more background into that labor market assessment and how the information gathered can be beneficial and utilized?
Right. So as you are aware, based on a report from the Cayman Compass, there were 2,700 individuals from the tourism sector that were displaced in the COVID pandemic, right? The report serves as a means of identifying gaps where we need to train individuals who are displaced and get them recertified and ready for the workforce as a result of that pandemic as well. So that's one of the key deliverables in terms of assessing the gaps in terms of the market, the labor market, what is required in the tourism industry, from construction to ICT and hospitality. And then that report now will inform us now how we need to cater to those individuals to enable them to be empowered to get re-employment into the system that we have now currently.
Okay. And how has the feedback been?
The feedback has been great so far. Currently, our consultant has completed their needs assessment survey. They are actually working on a first draft now currently, which will give us more insights of where the specific gaps are and where we need to focus on. We have a event that's coming up that hopefully we'll be able to share those findings in more detail. But till things are concretized, I would want to mention too much of what the findings are looking like until we have it completed by the consultants.
Okay. And this is the first labor force assessment undertaken by you and your team?
Yes, in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce as well.
Okay, good. There has been other labor force assessments done, I think, before with the ESO department. Is that something you're aware of?
Yeah, it is. So we actually used a lot of their base data when it comes to understanding where we should absolutely focus on. So unlike the ESO, which takes a look at the entire population and has several questions that it's trying to address, we sort of really narrowed ours to really look at what are the emerging occupations, employment needs of the future, and what's the current skill level of Caymanians in their ability to secure those jobs, and how do we, as a university, business community, aka chamber, government institution, aka work, then create a framework for training Caymanians for these future jobs to ensure that these gaps and opportunities are not missed.
Okay, very good. And I remember it, Jonathan. I took some time to actually go through it, and I think that the information is very valuable. And can you just remind us again what insights and what can the country gain from this information going forward?
Right. So there's much information to be garnered from this report. Basically, it serves as a database for the government to know where the skilled persons who are being trained can be taken from. Right. For example, work department will be able to determine certified suitably trained Caymanians. They'll be able to have that database to know who is trained in what areas. Additionally, it will create us here at UCCI as well will have an ability to tailor our programs and our certification courses to suit the gaps that the report reveals, right? So we'll be able to retrofit our programs here to ensure that the technical and vocational aspect of the university has updated programs and curriculum that individuals will be able to access, and to knowing that when they complete their certifications, they'll be filling a gap and filling a need that has been created as well. So of course, there are many other aspects that could serve as a positive role for the general Caymanian population, but certainly it will be a means of ensuring that we fill those gaps that were created coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, and we hope we don't go back into that same
Yes,
situation.
most definitely.
I know, but at least on a good point, we will be more prepared. And I think that COVID, and we're going to just talk a little bit here about the impact that COVID had to sort of elaborate on how beneficial this assessment is, because I think we are now better prepared, and COVID maybe have been a good thing in a sense, because we always talked about filling those gaps and finding employment for people, but I think that what was missing was the information and the data on who was in the situation of unemployment and what were the skills and what training was required. So do you think that I'm correct in saying that as a result of COVID, we're now in a better position to really look at the labor market, and because of those programs that were put in place since then?
Yes, yeah, and most definitely. The thing with the COVID-19 pandemic is that it forced us to do research, right, and realize that many a times in Caribbean countries, a lot of decisions are made without adequate research and data, right? So now that we have research and data guiding our decisions, then it's only right that we should have more success in terms of either filling those gaps and ensuring that people meet the needs of their specific communities or the specific government. And of course, you'd have known that the program itself serves to ensure that 50 Caymanians are employed, 50 are trained and certified in the various areas that I mentioned before. And of course, 25 of them, our goal is to have them completing their internships as well in various relevant sectors that the study outlines. So for sure, if it leads to more research, then for sure, we should be in a better position going forward.
Yes, I think, and as we can see, we've seen the unemployment numbers actually reducing, and we hope that that is matched with acceptable levels of income. Because it's one thing to be employed, but another thing to be paid for what you're doing. And I think the qualification and education that comes along with filling these gaps is what will guide us towards those goals. course, like I said, it's one thing to be working, but you want to be compensated accordingly to live in an expensive jurisdiction, such as we do now. Will the information from the labor market assessment be shared with everyone, including government officials and homes, and it will be made public? In other words,
Yeah, yes, most definitely. It will be available to the various sectors. They'll be able to have access to it for their decision-making purposes. It should be a publicly available report.
yes.
So yes, it will definitely be there as for the country's benefit to use for the various partners in the various sectors.
Okay, good. Right. And when can we expect to see it?
Well, and currently we are planning a number of events. Well, currently we have a business breakfast that's upcoming on the 16th of June. We're hoping that the consultant is able to provide us with a draft that should be able to be shared with the various partners, so we could get that initial feedback and they could make their changes from there. So tentatively the 16th is when we seek to get our first draft that we'll be able to share with the public, so that the public can start giving feedback on that report as well.
Okay, very good. I'm really happy to have you back on, or have information for our newspaper and other platforms. So share the information, because information is so important, especially for the whole and wider country. Can you provide an overview of upcoming events? I attended one recently. I think my last one was at the business breakfast, and that went very well. I was very impressed with the presentations, and I look forward to also the food was very good. That club, I applaud them. It was a good Friday morning breakfast, but of course the information was invaluable, and I just love hearing about this. And before you answer the question and talk about what you plan to do, information is so important as we move forward, and so many things happen, and they get forgotten, and it's amazing. Our memory span seems to be overloaded, and so we like to have this information being repeated. So if I ask the questions to repeat things in different interviews like this one, just bear with me.
Yeah,
Because
sure.
especially on the radio, and for those people who listen to Bobo FM, once we're on the radio, people are doing things. They're at work, they're driving, and they may catch a little snippet of what's happening. And so you might hear me ask to remind a couple things, but that's strategic to make sure the information is not only heard but remembered, and especially when it's so important as the program of Resembled. And we need to make sure that everyone hears it. So yes, give us an idea of what's coming up.
All right. So as I mentioned before, we have another networking breakfast, but it's more or less a business breakfast slash labor market assessment forum, where we seek to study the findings of that report on a preliminary level. And of course, we have our graduation coming up for the students as well on the 19th of August, all being well, where we will seek to finalize. As we know, we are coming to the end of the project. The students would have completed training. Some are being certified at the moment. For example, the ICT students are doing their CompTIA certifications on the 16th of June. And from that, we have recently partnered with them as university as well. So we seek to continue that partnership. So that's another tick in the certification book. And of course, through those main two events, of course, I don't know if you would have heard of our symposium that was held on the 25th of May, where we had many students, coming to get an idea of the technical vocational department. There are various multiple partners who are there, Minister of Education, work, showing the students of the different opportunities that are available to them, so that from an early age, they'll be able to start, choosing where they want to go in the field of work. Normally, there's a stigma associated with technical and vocational training. So our role as a university was to kind of destigmatize that aspect of it, to let them know that there are valuable work options in the technical field, right?
Yes.
At the symposium, somebody mentioned that their gardener makes more money than them, right? That was very interesting to know, right? So
And I believe it.
Right, so there's much opportunity there, and of course,
Yes.
we seek to highlight those upcoming events, the business breakfast, and of course, the graduation that's upcoming.
And I had just talked about the symposium. I have some appreciation for those events because we tend to think differently. We have a mindset that the Cayman Islands only for banking and tourism. I came here quite a long time ago, but I am a banker by profession. But everyone wanted to work in the bank, and the parents wanted to work in the bank as well. But when we found out who really making the money, it wasn't the bankers. It wasn't the office, and you can see from the way things are going. Just something today I shared with you. I remember my son playing a lot of video games, but today I had to say, you know what? He was right because that was preparing him for his technological future. Those guys who were in there playing video games and on the computer late at night, they developed this strong skill. And now he came back from school with a degree in computer engineering. And there is so much demand for his skills at the help desk, which doing what he used to do. He's actually my streaming engineer, but he learned all those skills from streaming his games and so on. So it goes, and believe me, the starting salary that I'm hearing about is not what you make in the bank today. So, and if you talk about the plumbers, the solar farm engineers, the technology, we can talk about that for. So I just want to get the feedback on, the industries today and how there's a future not only with education but with financial, achievement and satisfaction. Mr. Cleveland, maybe you could just jump in a bit and talk about
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
future.
Thank you for that. And I think you're really spot on here. One of the individuals that we spoke with and actually was a partner with us in developing the labor market assessment was the individual who headed the scholarship division for the government. And one of the things that we were concerned about is we are paying for students to go abroad and acquire this education, and oftentimes their skill level is not a really good match for the opportunities that are back home here for them. So a lot of them end up simply staying abroad and not really returning, which doesn't really put us at a strategic advantage as an island.
Yes.
And so in trying to figure out what are the actual opportunities that our young people are aspiring towards, what are they asking to be trained in, and are those jobs readily available here? Do we have data and analytics opportunities here for them on island? Do we have solar implementation opportunities for them here on island? Do we have financial services jobs available for them here on island? And so that's one of the questions that we're hoping to have answered by the labor market assessment, so that we can move resources in that direction towards supporting their need. But I also want to mention something else that I think is really important as well. One of the questions that we really are excited to see what people are seeing is we are also putting ourselves in a position to be evaluated, because we're asking individuals, what's your perception of UCCI as an academical institution and a purveyor of this sort of training? Because that's important. Their perception of who we are and our ability to provide this training in partnership with our partners from business and government is really important as well, because there may be places that we need to learn from and make changes as
Yes.
we focus our attention on our three critical, I like to call them customer base, because it's students, it's government, and it's business. And so how
Yes.
do we repackage strategically so that we can meet the needs of that growing population, and they don't leave and take other options when we are right here on island, able and willing to be able to provide that.
It's such a great point, and you hit it right on the head. It's so important, and it's a future we're talking about, and one thing we love to be sure that our folks, our kids, have a future right here in their home, and don't have, like it's mentioned, to go overseas. And I think they're getting to learn that hey, there's opportunities now, and like someone always said, we have over 30,000 work permits. I mean, it's um, that's quite a bit of jobs now there. So there are opportunities here, right? Graduation is coming up soon. When is that date?
Well, that date is tentatively the 19th of August. That's our slated date thus far. As you're aware, we want to ensure that all the students are, completed their training. Most have completed training, but ensuring that they're certified, right? We don't want them to, of course, be going to a graduation. We're not certified, and they have that issue there, right? So we're just our main issue now is trying to tie up the program, ensure that those who have any certification outstanding, for example, those who have not been successful, give them an opportunity to resit as well, so that they could be smiling on graduation day, saying that they have completed, and they'll be able to now head into the work world. For those who have not, some have already entered into the workforce already under the various sectors. But yeah, that would be the celebration aspect of it going forward. So we really look forward to that. But of course, we have to, do the prep work to get there.
Yes. Is that the first group that will be graduating?
Yes. That'll
Yes.
be the first group from the resuming program. Yes.
Yes. I think I was there when they launched it. And
Okay.
yes, so that must be a great achievement. And, did you have any dropouts? Or that everyone is still there in the group?
No, I mean, I think it's we have had to struggle a little bit with how do we keep the students engaged and motivated in this process, right? And so we have had about a little over 10 students who have officially dropped out of the program. We are hoping that we figured a way for them to really re-engage, at least pick up some sort of certification in their stretch. But here I think really is the good news about what we have accomplished thus far. Based on the initial assessment, we realized that there were quite a lot of opportunities for tourism for individuals who want to be waiters or waitresses. Not a lot of opportunities for Caymanians to be managers. And so one of the things that this program specifically did was attempt to train supervisors for the hospitality industry.
Okay.
And so we have already protested a course. We had 9 students going through it. As to date, 5 of them already have completed their certification and have also moved themselves into one or two of them moved themselves into permanent placement as managers. And so that's a course that will now stay on the UCCI curriculum and hopefully train more and more Caymanians, not just to be entry-level workers in tourism, but to be managers in tourism, which is a clear gap that we have identified based on just where the work permits are going and what Caymanians have access to.
Yes. It's excellent. What are the plans for resident students and CCI moving forward?
Well, we continue to support them in regards to training and certification. As Cleveland would have mentioned, there are a number of courses now that would have been conceptualized by the program, which will be permanently on the books here, which should be there to support the students or any interested individuals going forward, so they could certify themselves and be prepared for the technical aspects of society. I think one of the things that we remember during the COVID-19 pandemic is that everyone got a full assessment whether they were essential or not, right? So the COVID, you knew whether they were essential or not. You figured out that construction people were essential, and the medical services people were essential, right? And so for sure, now we'll have that curriculum there to support individuals in the event of something like that happening again. Now we'll know that we have that workforce available to us.
That's excellent. I remember when we started speaking about this, Mr. Cleveland. I think a year ago. I was in the BRAC then. I
Yeah.
think it was, yes, I just last year. About a year ago, I was in the BRAC. I returned in June last year, so I was in the BRAC when we started talking about it in earnest. And one of the questions I had for you was, is it just for 1 year,
Yeah.
or do you think that there'll be a future?
Yeah.
And you said this is going to be going on and
It
on
has to.
once we have the
It has to
funding.
be legacy.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we're seeing it and we're hearing it now. And I think by what you have said in the last half an hour, that things are really picking up. You're just starting what we have envisioned or what you thought about or what you planned for. and there's no going back. I think the energy is there, and you're getting support from the private sector and from the government of the day, and which is good. So I think that there are great strides and a happy future for not only for UCCI but also for the students and for the country. Any final words, Mr. Matthew?
No, not at this time. And I just seek to encourage individuals to support the program where they can, in whatever capacity you can. Of course, our goal is to ensure that we have these individuals, trained and certified, and of course, benefit and give back to the local society and community. So in any way, necessarily it's not necessarily financial, but of course in any way, those of us who are in key positions, if we see opportunities there to assist them, we would implore that you do in any way you can.
Thank you, Mr. Cleveland.
Yeah, and just to give Matthew a shout out. He jumped in here when things were going full speed ahead and has had a lot of learning in a short space of time, but is handling it very well. And of course, myself and the rest of the team are here to support him as he moves forward. But just to kind of put a full stop on what we're talking about, the first Resume Bid program is going to give us two really critical things, Ralph. It's going to give us a labor market assessment that we could continue to look at when we looking to design courses for future needs for Caymanians. It's going to give us a strong partnership with government and business, so they're constantly in our ear and giving us insight on how these courses should be designed so they're always fit for purpose. And now these courses become a part of the UCCI curriculum, and now moving forward, we can offer courses in solar, we can offer courses in tourism management, we can offer courses in IT management leadership. Critical. And so the success of that first grant has given us a shot at a second grant that expands the footprint even bigger, that says what's a long-term sustainability plan look like for your institution, and how does those courses and that training fit into what the university looks like 10, 15 years from now, and what other steps can you take to further soften your carbon footprint. In other words, we did a small solar project in the first grant. We're doing a much larger solar project in the second grant, and now hoping to then bring in, Caymanians who can be taught on how to better utilize and understand energy efficiencies in their homes and help to soften our footprint in general as an island. All moving towards that long-term sustainability, not just of UCCI, but of the Cayman Islands.
Thank you very much. Well said. Well, gentlemen, it's always a pleasure to have you on Cayman Conversations, and hope to see you again very soon, whether it's at breakfast or at one of those big celebrations or at the graduation. Have a great afternoon, gentlemen. And
thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks,
as always.
It was great.
Thank you for joining Cayman Conversations as we seek to elevate the level of media conversations with our special guests from our walk of life. Remember to like, share, and follow Caymanian Times social media pages. Don't forget to pick up your copy of our Wednesday and Friday newspapers at locations across the islands. Cayman Conversations is a production of the Caymanian Times newspaper. Have a great evening, and remember to drive safely on our roads. Goodbye.
I'm so in love with you, make me feel alright. I'm so in love with you, time goes on and seasons oh they change. One thing remains the same, I'm so in love with you. Sometimes it's hard to give of yourself. It's not what you want, it's what you get. get. Love the one you with, you'll see it will fit. Time you love them more for what you need. Well, hold my hand tonight. I'm so in love with you. Make me feel alright. I'm so in love with you. Time goes on and seasons they change. One thing remains the same. I'm so in love with you. Sometimes it's hard to give of yourself. Sometimes it's hard to give. It's not what you want, it's what you get. It's what you get. It's what you get. It's what you get. Love the one you with, you'll see it will fit. It's what you get every time. In time you love them more for what you did. Well, hold my hand tonight. I'm so in love with you. Make me feel alright. I'm so in love with you. Well, oh, hey, I'm so in love with you. I'm so in love with you.
Everybody's feeling hard.
them science and biology.